So think about how many times a day you literally tell yourself to just pay attention, right? You're forcing yourself to focus on an email, maybe a spreadsheet, or even a conversation, only to get to the end of the day feeling totally drained, stressed out, and, well, pretty mindless. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive fundamental confusion that genuinely dictates how you and I experience reality every single day. We hear these two buzzwords constantly, usually tossed around interchangeably by teachers, bosses, and even ourselves: attention and mindfulness. We tell ourselves we just need to pay attention to a task, and we just kind of assume that makes us mindful of it. But as cognitive psychology tells us, that is a totally different story. These are actually two completely distinct psychological tools, and they function in entirely different ways inside our brains. Are attention and mindfulness the same thing? Look, it's incredibly common to assume they are. I mean, if you're laser focused on some intense project at work, you probably think you're being mindful. But honestly, you might just be exercising raw, unfiltered attention while being completely unmindful of your skyrocketing stress levels, your clenched jaw, or that terrible posture you're holding. So let's dive right in and totally shatter that assumption. Because once you actually understand the difference between these two cognitive processes, it unlocks this massive upgrade in how we manage our mental health. All mindfulness involves attention, but not all attention is mindfulness. Okay, this is the golden rule we're going to use to anchor our whole journey today. Think of it like this. Attention is the vehicle, and mindfulness is the destination. You absolutely need the vehicle to get there, but just because you're driving doesn't mean you've actually arrived at mindfulness. See, mindfulness is this highly specialized, intentional application of attention. Meanwhile, attention on its own, it could be totally detached from any real sense of inner awareness. To really wrap our heads around this, we can just look at the basic questions each process answers. Attention is essentially a targeting system. It just asks, what am I focusing on right now? It's like the lens of a camera zooming way in on a specific object, say a textbook or a screen, while completely blurring out the background. Mindfulness, on the other hand, asks a much deeper question. It asks, how am I paying attention? If attention is the camera lens, mindfulness is the filter on that lens. It brings in these rich qualities of awareness, curiosity, and intention. So tension is just the spotlight's target, right? But mindfulness is the actual quality, the color and the temperature of the light itself. Let's look at the traits. Attention can be completely automatic. It's this rapid, narrow focus of your mental resources. Imagine a blaring car horn out on the street. Boom, it automatically hijacks your attention, zero permission asked. Or maybe you're intensely focused on a math problem, unconsciously tuning absolutely everything else out. It's fast, it's narrow, and it is highly reactive. But now, let's just take a breath. Mindfulness cannot be automatic. It is strictly deliberate. It requires a really conscious, active choice to cultivate a state of wide awareness, and most importantly here, acceptance. It's a completely different, much more deliberate rhythm of the mind. Another super fascinating way to separate the two is by looking at exactly where we point the camera. When we're using basic attention, we are almost always projecting it outward to navigate the physical world. We use it for reading a book or, driving a cart on a chaotic highway. But mindfulness, it flips that script entirely. Mindfulness turns the lens inward. Suddenly, you aren't just staring at the traffic, you're actually noticing the incredibly tight grip your hands have on the steering wheel. It actively focuses our mental resources on inner objects. We use it to observe our own passing thoughts without judging them, to notice physical feelings in our chest, or to just kind of check in with our body. To really get why turning the lens inward is such a game changer, we need to peek at the operating system running behind the camera lens. Let's start with sensation versus perception. Now, sensation is just your body detecting raw physical stimuli. Your eyes detect a red, round object. Simple enough. But perception, that's the complex mental process where your brain interprets that raw data to actually give it meaning, like recognizing that the red, round object is, in fact, an apple. Attention might help you spot the red object for sure, but your cognitive perception is what literally builds your reality. Mindfulness is this unique, almost superpower-like ability to step back and watch this very operating system working in real time, bridging that gap between raw data and cognitive meaning. Now, this process of perception acts as a constant filter, and it runs on two main pillars. First up is top-down processing. This is entirely concept-driven. It's when your brain uses prior knowledge, expectations, and past memories to interpret the world. Picture this. You're walking in the woods at twilight. You see this curved shape on the path, and you jump back in total panic. Your bottom-up processing, which is the second pillar, the one that's strictly data-driven, well, it just saw a shape based on raw sensory info. But your top-down processing used past memories to scream, "snake," even though it was literally just a stick. We are constantly bombarded by stimuli, and these two pillars filter the world so we don't just short circuit. But because top-down processing relies so heavily on expectations, it can totally trap us in negative loops if our past experiences were traumatic or highly stressful. So how does all this abstract cognitive theory actually help us in the real world? Well, when we take this understanding of attention and perception and we apply that inward-looking filter of mindfulness to it, we essentially step out of the psychology lab and straight into the clinic. This is the exact point where learning to shift simple attention into active mindfulness becomes a recognized, incredibly powerful therapeutic tool, a tool that actively changes and honestly even saves lives. The real secret ingredient here, the thing that upgrades simple attention into life-changing mindfulness, is acceptance. Acceptance means receiving your present experience, whether that happens to be a feeling of profound joy or a feeling of deep, uncomfortable anxiety, completely without judgment or preference. You just observe it with curiosity and kindness. This is not about passively resigning yourself to your problems, no way. It is an active, radical act of defiance against our brain's default setting to constantly judge, criticize, and avoid. By swapping out judgment for this kind of radical acceptance, you drastically alter how you respond to your own internal experience. And let me tell you, the real-world payoff of understanding this psychological distinction is just staggering. By teaching people how to pay attention with acceptance, clinical psychology has seen some truly incredible success. Mindfulness is showing massive promise for treating severe clinical conditions like depression and generalized anxiety disorder. It's become a widely recognized treatment for borderline personality disorder, and it's proven highly useful in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, among military veterans. Why? Well, because through targeted mindfulness exercises, people can finally observe their own repetitive negative thinking, those tricky top-down perceptual filters we talked about, without getting all tangled up in them. It literally stops the cycle of maladaptive rumination right in its tracks. To actually teach this skill, clinicians often rely on an 8 to 10-week program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR. You can really think of it as a progression, a journey. It kicks off in the quiet isolation of sitting meditation, which develops that raw capacity for sustained, directed attention. Then it incorporates the physical movement of mindful yoga. Next up is the body scan meditation, which trains clients to non-judgmentally observe physical sensations. And finally, the whole thing culminates in bringing this deliberate, conscious mindfulness into the everyday chaos of daily life. Because the goal here isn't to escape reality by just sitting on a cushion all day. The real goal is to wash the dishes, walk down the street, or eat a meal with complete, non-judgmental presence, living fully in the moment rather than constantly wishing things were different than they are. Which brings us to our final thought. The very next time you find yourself intensely focused on a task, or maybe caught up in a total whirlwind of thoughts, I want you to ask yourself this. Are you just paying attention to your life, or are you actually being mindful of it? Remember, attention is just the spotlight. Mindfulness is making the choice to hold that light with awareness, curiosity, and non-judgmental acceptance. It might seem like a small shift in how your brain processes reality, but as we've explored today, it makes an absolute world of difference. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I really encourage you to take that question with you into the rest of your day.